Today, Grizzly and I are just kind of cruising around. Beautiful Sunday, cruising. Yeah, I remember the days when we used to be able to do this thing called Cruz'in State. State Street is the main drag here in Salt Lake City. And, well, back in the day, the thing to do was to take your hot rod and, well, drive up and down the road in the evening. I know, kind of a strange thing, but cruising was a rite of passage, I guess, is a good way of putting it. When we were growing up here in Salt Lake, you know, while Grizz and I are out, maybe we'll go by and visit some of those places that we used to cruise and see what it looks like these days. So stick with Mad Dog Merv as we go Cruz'in State.
I started high school at Highland High School back in the late 1970s, which was a great time to be in high school. I started to be exposed to a culture of cars and hot rods, and I thought this was kind of a cool thing. A lot of the guys that I knew and hung around with had Mustangs, like Evan Banks here with his 67 with a 390 in it. It was an awesome car. Evan was an upperclassman, like so many of the guys that I hung around with, and he would talk about this thing called Cruz'in State. Sounded kind of fun, like something I wanted to be a part of. This Z28 model here is modeled after one of the guys who used to work at the corner store on Highland Drive that we frequented all the time. So you can see that this was a culture that was all around me at that time. Well, when I got my own car, started hanging out with some of the guys my own age, and they had some pretty cool cars as well. We called ourselves the Highland High Drag Race Association, and we would meet a couple of times a week over the park, throw some football, things like that. And then on Saturday night, we would get together and cruise state. Here I am with my bestest buddy, Dave Knopfsinger. Dave, I first met in our small engines class our freshman year. In fact, there was a lot of guys that I met in that class that we've become lifelong friends. But Dave one day rode his bike over, helped me work on my car that was there at the auto shop, and well, we just never looked back since, and we've been thick as thieves for years. I had purchased my first car when I was 14 years old. I paid $50 for it. And we affectionately called it Mervin's Miracle because it was a miracle the thing would even roll down the road. Replace the engine, transmission, so many other things in this car. And this is how it looked through most of high school with all the primer and whatnot on it. Dave and some of my other friends would come over and help me with it, and I think it's part of the reason that they really wanted to get their own vehicles and work on them and make their own hot rods. I had my engine here all hot rodded up with the Holley carburetor. Dave had this Nova that had belonged to his mother, and she sold it to him. And of course, Dave did all the fun things, painted it and put a new engine in it and put the wheels on it. So these were the cars that we kind of took out and cruised the streets with. Now, somewhere here I ought to say that cruising today isn't what cruising used to be. It's taken on a whole different term. What we meant by cruising back then was just kind of driving around, showing off our car, trying to pick up on chicks. You know, that's what you did back then. And cruising was really just driving back and forth up and down the main street, which was State Street in Salt Lake City. Here was one of the founding members of our group. This is Pat Chittister with his 1969 Dodge Charger. He was a year ahead of us, and he was also Sterling Scholar in automotive mechanics that year. Here's a model of one of our other friends' cars, Peter Willeitner. Peter had the fastest car at Highland, and it had been really souped up, ran about a 12-second time. Pete didn't hang around with us a whole lot, but he did cruise state with us a couple of times. There were a couple of times we cut class with Pete, and we actually got in some pretty decent street races back in those days. And here we got Mark Miller, Mark with his 72 Dodge Demon. It had a 6-cylinder engine in it. He'd gotten this car from his dad's girlfriend. It was a powder blue color, and he promptly put some mag wheels on it, painted it, put a scoop on it. I mean, it really looked nice, and he would cruise with us from time to time. He went to the drags with us and would take it out there. Back when I was running my little green Comet with the 6-cylinder, we'd kind of have fun at the drags racing our little 6-cylinder cars. They were probably the slowest thing out there, but we didn't care. It was still a lot of fun. So now that you know the principal players in our story, let's take a little cruise down State Street, modern day, and we're going to start out here in Murray, out in the area around the old Vista Theater and the Murray Theater. I know that a lot of people didn't go quite this far, but every once in a while we would go all the way out to this area and make our turnaround, and this is what it looks like today. So going north from there, here we are approaching the corner of 33rd South and State. This is where there used to be like a big bank building that was vacant. This was our final turnaround. Pretty much all the time we'd at least come to 33rd. We'd make the turnaround and go back this direction on State. You can see how much this area of South Salt Lake has changed over the years. Coming up here on the left, though, is one of our favorite places. Here at 2990 South State Street is the site of the old Super Shops. It is now some kind of a tire store. It's been many things over the years since Super Shops went out, but the old Super Shop store in Salt Lake City, where we used to get so many parts for our cars. This is actually where I bought the tunnel ram for my blue 72 Comet that I ran my junior and senior year. I think I paid something like $350 for this tunnel ram and another Holley carburetor. It didn't run worth a crap on this car, but it sure looked cool. So headed north, here we are at 2700 South and State. The what we know as the FHP hospital is off to the left, but this was one of the main turnarounds that we would go. We'd come down here to 27th and turn around. On the right, there used to be a Winchell's, and so we'd quite often stop in there and get some donuts, and oh man, I miss Winchell's. So heading north from 2700, we pass what used to be the old American Auto Parts store, and right around the corner was the old American Automotive Machine Shop. Here on a much grayer day, I've shot some video of after you come underneath I-80, and you can see the Ritz Classic sign up ahead. Remember the miniature golf there, how you used to go and play miniature golf and watch the cars cruise. Here we are by going right by Hinckley Dodge. So on the other side of Ritz Classic, headed towards 21st South, all of this has changed so much, but there is still that 7-Eleven on the left-hand side, and now there's that new county complex that we're just going by here on the right. But on the left is now O.C. Tanner. And remember what used to be there many years ago? That's right, the original F.G. Ferry and Son. And I spent a lot of time there when I was a teenager. In fact, it was at this location that I bought the first carburetor for my Cougar way back in the day. That was the first thing I bought for my car, was a new Holley carburetor. So continuing on past the old Checker Auto Parts. So here at about 1350 South and State on the west side of the street was also an F.G. Ferry and Son. This is actually where their welding shop was, where they did a lot of muffler work, and I had a friend who worked here at one point in time. I remember their main location closed down in about 1979, and this one followed in 80 or 81, and FG Ferry pretty much went out of business completely in Salt Lake City. Sad to see them go. So on the road again north from 1700 South, going by the old South High School, and there's the McDonald's that's on that corner there by South High. How many times did we go by there while we were out cruising? There was a lot of chicken McNuggets in my car, I'll tell you what. Through the intersection at 1300 South, there's the old Glens Keys that's been there forever. Hubcap Heaven is long gone, of course. And up to the area of about 11th South, and everybody remember the old Tourist Auto, the transmission place that's there on the west side of the street. And then there was that, I can't remember the name of the hotel that used to be there, but there was that nice long stretch of lawn out there. Dave and I used to go out there and throw football quite often when we'd cruise State. And just north of there was the old Grand Central, and quite often we would sit there. This was kind of one of our spots that we would sit and watch the cars drive by there on 9th South and State Street. One of my favorite memories of that parking lot was the time that we took my green Comet, the one with the 6-cylinder in it. I had just put some high back bucket seats in it out of a Monte Carlo that swiveled, and they were not bolted down. And Dave and I were sitting there. As we left the parking lot, I hit the gas and went around the corner, and Dave went flying. He's in the back seat behind me going, "Damn you, Marvin!" Yeah, I was kind of a character that way back in the days with my friends. Here's the site of the old Arctic Circle that used to be there on 9th South, just east of State Street, and it's been torn down now and is gone. So just up the road a little bit there is the site of the old Noggles, and this was one of the places where we would sit out front, open the hood on the car, and show off. This was one of the things I used to do a lot, is take the hood off the old Cougar and show off the engine. And you can see here is the Sears on the corner of 8th, and that was a place where all the high rollers would hang out. And high rollers would be the guys that had some real horsepower under the hood, and it was kind of fun to drive by and see what was sitting there. These were usually guys that were much older and had a lot more money to put into their rides. So anyway, this is kind of the view nowadays. It sure has changed. We're going to head north past 8th South, the old Sears here on the west side of the street. This whole area has changed so much over the years. So on to 6th South and past the old Ken Garf building and past 5th. Here we are at the old City and County building. And this whole area started to really get packed in on the weekends. Here's the 4th South intersection. I remember how packed this area would be with cars. Just these 4 or 5 blocks, it would take you 45 minutes to get through on a night because they were just so packed in there. Hey, look, here we are on 3rd, and it's that old D's, D's Drive-In that we used to go to. On north, past the 2nd South area, and this was the top of the area we would cruise at. And you can see off to the right the Eagle Gate condominiums, and the whole reason why State Street cruising was banned.
It was a lot of fun going down memory lane. You know, it's unfortunate that we all had to quit Cruz'in State, and the whole thing was that they built this condo, these Golden Eagle Gate condo, not Golden Gate, Eagle Gate condos, and they built those there on the corner. And people started to complain because there's cars cruising up and down the boulevard all night, and it's keeping me awake. And, oh my goodness! You know what? Why the heck did you move there then? You know, bunch of idiots. Anyway, so they complained to the city, and the city said, well, people really shouldn't be cruising. It's not a good activity, you know. So anyway, they put up signs and made laws that you can't drive past a certain point in the road more than once in an hour, or it's considered cruising and they would ticket you. So they effectively killed cruising in Salt Lake City. And well, kids nowadays just have no idea what that even was like. So anyway, it was kind of fun to go revisit that area, even though we did it backwards. Usually you'd start at the top of State Street and go down, 21st or 33rd and turn around. But it was a lot of fun back in the days. Yeah, there was a little bit of street racing, and yeah, there was a lot of revving up of engines, and there was a whole lot of spinning of tires. It was kind of neat. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this today, and well, join us again for some more trips down memory lane. Thanks.
Wow.